Cathrix clicked his mandibles in what humans had learned was their species' equivalent of barely contained laughter. That your civilization only achieved FTL travel 3 decades ago. Sarah Thompson, Earth's chief diplomatic officer to the Galactic Council, took another sip of her synthetically recreated coffee and smiled. The stuff wasn't quite right. Too bitter. Not enough of that earthy undertone. But it beat the hell out of trying to explain to alien baristas why humans needed their daily dose of caffeine-adjacent stimulants. That's correct, Ambassador. Though I'm sensing there's something amusing about that fact. The Arthroxy diplomat's compound eyes flickered with bioluminescent mirth. Oh, it's just... well, you understand. Most species don't even get considered for council membership until they've had FTL capabilities for at least a century. You humans are practically infants in galactic terms. Sarah maintained her diplomatic smile, but inside she was counting to 10 in every language she knew. This wasn't the first time she'd heard this particular line of reasoning, and she doubted it would be the last. Fascinating perspective, Ambassador. Tell me, how long has your species been traveling the stars? Oh, we achieved FTL travel nearly 800 years ago, Cathrix preened, his iridescent carapace shifting colors slightly in pride. A rather respectable tenure, wouldn't you say? Quite impressive, Sarah nodded, taking another sip. Though I have to ask, what's your take on the Lazarus Protocol? The ambassador's color shifting stopped abruptly. The... what protocol? The Lazarus Protocol. You know, the emergency procedures for reviving extinct species through genetic reconstruction? The ones we humans developed about, oh... She made a show of checking her archaic paper notebook, something that always unsettled the more technologically minded species. 12,000 years ago? The silence that followed was delicious. That's impossible, Cathrix finally managed, mandibles working overtime. 12,000 years ago your species was barely agricultural. Sarah's smile widened just a fraction. Oh, that's what we wanted everyone to think. See, humanity learned something very important very early on. It's better to be underestimated. We didn't just achieve FTL 3 decades ago, Ambassador. We rediscovered it. The coffee might have been synthetic, but the look of dawning comprehension on the ambassador's face was 100% organic. But the archaeological records, your primitive technologies, the digital age, the space race, all carefully orchestrated, Sarah explained, leaning back in her chair. You see, about 15,000 years ago, humanity reached a point of technological advancement that, quite frankly, terrified us. We had mastered faster-than-light travel, yes, but we'd also created weapons that could erase solar systems. We'd conquered death itself through consciousness transfer, but lost touch with what it meant to be human in the process. We had everything, and we were miserable. She paused to let that sink in, watching as Cathrix's antennae twitched in agitation. So our ancestors made a choice. They decided to start over. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. They buried most of our advanced technology in temporal vaults scattered across the galaxy, leaving only the most essential knowledge, like the Lazarus Protocol, hidden away in secure locations on Earth. Then they used targeted memory modification technology to give humanity a fresh start. But why? Cathrix's voice had lost its earlier condescension, replaced by genuine curiosity. Because they wanted us to rediscover everything the right way this time. To develop our technology alongside our wisdom, our power, alongside our responsibility. The digital age, the space race, all of it. Those weren't just steps forward. They were carefully planned rediscoveries, each one unlocking a little more of our buried heritage when we were ready for it. Sarah stood up, smoothing down her deliberately old-fashioned suit. 3 decades ago, we didn't achieve FTL travel, Ambassador. We simply decided we were finally mature enough to remember that we'd had it all along. The ambassador's mandibles worked silently for a moment. But that would mean that humanity isn't the youngest species in the council? Sarah grinned. Try the oldest. By about 7,000 years, give or take a few centuries. Those temporal vaults I mentioned? They're scattered across every major system in council space. We built most of the hyperspace lanes you all use before your species had mastered fire. Cathrix's carapace had shifted to a pale, almost sickly green. The council will never believe this without proof. Oh, we have proof. Mountains of it, actually. We just didn't see any reason to share it until now. But given the recent let's call them discussions about humanity's readiness for full council membership. We thought it might be time to open a few of those vaults. Just to clear up any misconceptions about our species' maturity level. The ambassador's antennae drooped. The council session tomorrow will be very interesting, Sarah finished for him, gathering her things. We're planning a little show and tell. Nothing too dramatic, just accessing a few thousand years' worth of preserved technology and historical records that we buried around the council chamber back when we built it. You built the council chamber? Ambassador. Sarah paused at the door, enjoying this moment perhaps a bit more than was strictly diplomatic. We built the planet it's sitting on. She left Krathos sitting there, his compound eyes fixed on nothing in particular, probably trying to process the fact that everything he thought he knew about galactic history had just been turned on its head. As she walked down the corridor of the Galactic Council's headquarters, or as the original builders had labeled it in the blueprints, Project New Beginning Phase 1, Sarah allowed herself a small chuckle. Tomorrow's council session would certainly be memorable, but it wasn't the revelations about humanity's past that she was looking forward to most. It was finally getting to tell everyone why humans were the only species in known space who had developed the concept of practical jokes. After all, 15,000 years was a long time to wait for a punchline. The next morning, as Sarah stood before the assembled council members, all 57 species represented, all watching with varying degrees of skepticism or concern, she couldn't help but appreciate the irony of the situation. The chamber's architecture, with its soaring arches and impossible geometries, had been deliberately designed to make younger species feel small and impressed. Now, as she prepared to activate the ancient recognition protocols that would cause the entire room to acknowledge its creators, she wondered if perhaps humanity's ancestors' flair for the dramatic hadn't been a bit much. "Distinguished representatives of the Galactic Council," she began, her voice carrying easily in the perfect acoustics that had been calibrated millennia ago. "I stand before you today to correct a rather significant historical oversight." She reached into her pocket and pulled out what appeared to be an ordinary stone. Another bit of theatrical flourish from the original builders. The quantum key hidden within it was already linking with systems that had laid dormant for thousands of years. "Humanity has been honored to be considered for council membership," she continued, trying not to smile as the first subtle changes began. Patterns in the floor that most species had assumed were merely decorative started to pulse with soft light. "However, we feel it's time to clarify our exact position in galactic society." The chamber's walls were beginning to shift now, layers of metamaterial that had masqueraded as simple stone for millennia finally awakening. Several council members were looking around nervously. "To put it simply," Sarah held up the stone, which was now floating above her palm, "we're not applying for membership in your council." The stone burst apart in a shower of light, each fragment expanding into a holographic display of human history. Real human history, stretching back thousands of years before any other species had achieved spaceflight. "We're simply reopening our original office." The chamber erupted in chaos as hidden doorways appeared in walls that had seemed solid for centuries, revealing vast archives of human knowledge and technology. The ceiling transformed into a vast star map showing the true extent of ancient human civilization, and the council members' seats rearranged themselves into their original configuration, with the human seat at the center, where it had always been. As the pandemonium unfolded around her, Sarah caught Ambassador Krathos's eye and winked. The Arthroxy diplomat managed something that might have been a laugh. "So," Sarah addressed the stunned assembly, "shall we begin discussing the real reason we decided to wake everything up? Because believe me, the fact that humanity built this place is actually the least interesting revelation we have for you today." She paused for dramatic effect, another human tradition that suddenly made a lot more sense to everyone present. "Now, who wants to hear about the dimensional bridge we left running in the Andromeda Galaxy?" The ensuing silence was broken only by the sound of several thousand years' worth of hidden technology humming back to life, and Sarah Thompson's very human, very satisfied chuckle. Sometimes the best way to make an entrance was to reveal you'd been there all along. A dimensional bridge to Andromeda? First speaker Zilith's crystalline form vibrated with frequencies that humans had learned to interpret as extreme agitation. "You mean to tell us that your species has had intergalactic travel capabilities for—" "Oh, that's not even the interesting part," Sarah interrupted, pulling up a holographic display that materialized from what had previously appeared to be her simple metal bracelet. "The interesting part is what we found there." The council chamber, still humming with newly awakened ancient technology, fell into an even deeper silence. Sarah could practically feel the mixture of fear, awe, and indignation radiating from the assembled representatives. It was, she had to admit, pretty satisfying. Before I continue, she added, enjoying this moment perhaps more than she should, would anyone like some real coffee? The replication systems in this chamber are actually capable of producing it correctly. She glanced meaningfully at the synthetic brew she'd been forced to drink earlier. Ambassador Cathrix, still trying to process everything, clicked his mandibles. Is this really the time for beverages? Ambassador, Sarah smiled. In about 5 minutes, you're going to wish you had something stronger than coffee. But suit yourself. She waved her hand, and a perfectly brewed cup of steaming coffee appeared on the podium beside her. Several council members flinched. Now, about Andromeda. 15,000 years ago, when humanity decided to take our little sabbatical, we weren't just running away from our own technological excess. We were also running a rather important experiment. You see, we'd discovered something rather peculiar about the nature of consciousness itself. The holographic display expanded, showing what appeared to be a massive structure floating in the space between galaxies. It looked almost organic, with sweeping curves and pulsing energy patterns that defied conventional engineering. We called it the Nexus, Sarah continued. It's a consciousness accelerator. Turns out, when you pool enough sentient minds together in the right way, interesting things start to happen. Reality gets a bit flexible. First speaker Zilith's crystalline form shifted colors rapidly. Are you suggesting that humanity figured out how to hack the universe itself? Yes, that's exactly what I'm suggesting. But like kids who found their parents' login credentials, we decided we weren't ready for that kind of power. So we set up the Nexus to run a very long-term experiment, connected it to Andromeda via the dimensional bridge, and, well, let's just say we've been collecting some very interesting data. What kind of data? This came from the Voidborn representative, their dark matter form rippling with curiosity. Sarah's smile widened. The kind that suggests we're not the only universe running this experiment. In fact, we're pretty sure we've detected signals from at least 3 other realities where different species figured out the same thing we did, and they all seem to have reached the same conclusion. She paused to take a sip of her coffee. Perfect temperature, perfect blend. God, she'd missed real coffee. Which was? Cathrix prompted, his earlier condescension completely forgotten. That consciousness itself is the universe's way of examining itself, and when you get enough conscious minds working together in the right way, you can, well, let's call it submit suggestions for reality updates. The chamber erupted in confused discussions, with various species trying to process the implications. Sarah waited patiently, sipping her coffee. But why reveal this now? The Voidborn representative's form pulsed with intensity. Why wake up all this technology and share these secrets after keeping them hidden for so long? Because. Sarah set down her coffee cup, her expression growing serious for the first time. The experiment is complete. And more importantly, something's answering back from Andromeda. Something that isn't us, isn't from any of the other realities we detected, and seems very, very interested in making contact. The silence that followed was absolute. So, Sarah continued, we figured it was time to wake everything up and let everyone in on the secret. Because whatever's trying to make contact, it's not just reaching out to humanity. It's reaching out to all conscious life in the galaxy, and we thought it might be nice to have some company when we answer. She waved her hand again, and the holographic display shifted to show real-time data from the Nexus. Patterns of energy and information danced across the display, forming complex structures that seemed to defy the laws of physics. The message, as near as we can translate it, is pretty simple. Ready to level up? Ambassador Cathrix's antennae twitched. Level up? Apparently, Sarah grinned, the universe has a sense of humor too. So, who's in? Because whatever happens next, we're pretty sure it's going to be interesting. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes, optical sensors, and various other sensory organs of each council member in turn. Oh, and one more thing, she added, almost as an afterthought. Remember how I mentioned humanity had conquered death through consciousness transfer? Those temporal vaults we left scattered around the galaxy? They're not just storage units. They're backup servers. Every human who's ever lived, their consciousness is preserved in there. And now that we're waking everything up. The implications hit the council like a wave. Not only was humanity the oldest species present, but they were all present, every human who had ever reached for the stars, now ready to rejoin the galaxy they'd helped shape. So, Sarah spread her hands wide. Shall we begin? Because I've got about 15,000 years worth of humans eager to see what's changed while they were away. A message from what might be a universal consciousness to answer. And, she glanced at her coffee cup. I finally have access to a decent cup of coffee. I'd say this is shaping up to be a pretty good day. The council chamber buzzed with a mixture of excitement, fear, and anticipation. The galaxy was about to change, and everyone present knew it. Sarah Thompson, Earth's chief diplomatic officer to the Galactic Council, and now, apparently, the spokesperson for 15,000 years of preserved human consciousness, couldn't help but smile. Sometimes the best way to wake up the galaxy was to reveal that the alarm clock had been set all along. Did everyone's translator just glitch, or did that message actually come through in the form of a meme? Ambassador Cathrix's mandibles were working overtime as the massive holographic display above the council chamber flickered with what was unmistakably an ancient human image macro format. Sarah bit back a laugh. The message from Andromeda was indeed displaying in an early 21st century meme format, complete with impact font and a cat image. The text read, "Consciousness level, intermediate. Would you like to know more?" "No glitch," she confirmed, watching as various council members tried to make sense of this deeply unusual first contact scenario. Apparently, whatever's reaching out has been studying us for a while, all of us, and it seems to have developed a particular appreciation for human communication formats. First speaker Zealith's crystalline form shimmered with what might have been incredulity. Are you suggesting that a potentially transcendent universal consciousness is communicating through primitive human image-based humor? First of all, Sarah raised an eyebrow. I'd be careful about throwing around the word primitive today of all days. Secondly, she gestured at the display, which had just updated to show a new meme featuring a surprised Pikachu face. I think it's trying to tell us something important about the nature of consciousness itself. The Voidborn representative's dark matter form pulsed thoughtfully. Explain. Well, Sarah began, pulling up additional data streams from the Nexus. What's the most fundamental aspect of consciousness? It's not logic, or reason, or even self-awareness. It's the ability to appreciate absurdity, to find humor in the unexpected, to meme. A ripple of what might have been laughter, or possibly existential dread, went through the chamber. But more importantly, she continued, look at how it's structuring the data packets. The holographic display split into multiple streams, showing complex patterns of information flow. It's not just sending messages, it's sending possibilities. As if on cue, the temporal vaults scattered throughout council space began transmitting new data. The chamber's displays filled with simultaneous feeds from thousands of locations, each showing similar patterns of awakening technology. Oh, Sarah's eyes widened slightly. That's new? What's new? Cathrix demanded, his earlier diplomatic reserve completely forgotten. The vaults, Sarah explained, quickly analyzing the incoming data. They're not just waking up the stored human consciousnesses, they're resonating with everything. Every species' neural patterns, every form of consciousness we've encountered. It's all harmonizing. The chamber's ancient systems were now displaying an intricate web of connections spanning the galaxy, with the Nexus at its center, and the temporal vaults acting as nodes in an impossibly complex network. Remember how I said humanity had figured out how to hack the universe? Sarah's voice had taken on an almost reverent quality. Turns out we weren't the only ones working on it. Every species, every civilization. You've all been contributing to the same project without even knowing it. Every thought, every dream, every moment of confusion or clarity, it's all been part of the pattern. The Voidborn representative rippled excitedly. You mean? Yes, Sarah nodded. Consciousness isn't just the universe's way of examining itself. It's the universe's way of rewriting itself. And now, she gestured at the displays, where the meme-based messages were evolving into something far more complex. I think we're being invited to participate in the next draft. Suddenly, every piece of technology in the chamber, both the newly awakened ancient systems and the modern devices carried by the council members, activated simultaneously. Streams of light connected each representative to the growing network of consciousness, creating a web of illumination that turned the council chamber into a miniature galaxy of thoughts and memories. Oh my, Sarah breathed, feeling the connection forming. This is something else. Through the network, she could feel them all. Not just the stored human consciousnesses awakening in the temporal vaults, but every member of every species represented in the council. Their thoughts, their fears, their hopes, all merging into something greater than the sum of its parts. And through it all, that signal from Andromeda, still occasionally communicating in memes, but now also sending something deeper, more fundamental, a pattern for restructuring reality itself. So, Sarah managed to say, her voice somehow carrying both her individual personality and echoes of countless others. Should we answer back? Ambassador Cathrix, his consciousness now part of the growing network, managed what might have been the first truly interspecies laugh in history. Do we have a choice? There's always a choice, Sarah replied, even as the pattern continued to grow and evolve around them. That's kind of the point. Consciousness is all about choices. Reality is all about choices. We just have more options now. The chamber, the council, the entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath as the pattern reached some kind of crescendo. The message from Andromeda crystallized into perfect clarity, no longer needing memes or any other format to convey its meaning. Reality is a consensus. Consciousness is the vote, cast wisely. Sarah Thompson, representing not just humanity but now somehow every species in the council, smiled at the sheer audacity of it all. Well, she said, her voice carrying the weight of billions of consciousnesses, I guess it's time to start campaigning for some universal amendments. The light from the network grew brighter, the pattern more complex, and somewhere in Andromeda, something vast and ancient and new all at once waited to see what they would choose. Reality, it seemed, was about to get interesting. Anyone else find it ironic that after 15,000 years of technological advancement, we're basically turning the universe into a giant social media platform? Sarah's voice carried both amusement and awe as the consciousness network continued to expand through the council chamber. The Voidborn representative's dark matter form pulsed with what might have been laughter. The similarity had not escaped our notice, though we find humanity's persistent obsession with likes and shares more comprehensible now. Speaking of sharing, Ambassador Cathrix interjected, his consciousness flowing through the network with increasing comfort. Is anyone else experiencing these memories? Sarah nodded, watching as cascades of shared experiences flowed through the chamber. Through the network, she could feel no fragments of lives lived across the galaxy. A Voidborn's first emergence into space-time, the crystalline beauty of Zelith's childhood mathematics lessons, the precise sensation of Cathrix's wings unfurling during his diplomatic initiation ceremony. Neural bleed, she explained, though the knowledge seemed to come from somewhere or someone else. The temporal vaults aren't just storing consciousness, they're creating a framework for shared experience. Think of it as the universe's first truly universal translator. First speaker Xylith's crystalline form resonated with a frequency that somehow conveyed both excitement and concern. But what do we do with this connection? How do we vote? As if in response to the question, new patterns began forming in the holographic displays. The message from Andromeda was evolving again, but this time it wasn't using memes or text. Instead, it was showing possibilities. Billions upon billions of them, each a slightly different version of reality. Oh, Sarah breathed, watching the patterns shift and flow. Oh, that's clever. What is? Several council members asked simultaneously, their thoughts harmonizing through the network. It's not asking us to vote on a single change, Sarah explained, her understanding growing as she connected with more of the network. It's showing us every possible change, every potential reality, all at once. And our consciousness, our collective consciousness, is naturally resonating with the ones that fit. Through the network, they could all see it now. Each consciousness, each mind, each stored memory was acting like a filter, naturally selecting and amplifying the possibilities that aligned with their deepest understanding of how reality should work. It wasn't a democratic vote in any traditional sense. It was more like reality itself was learning what shape it should take by consulting with everything conscious within it. But this is... Cathrix's thought patterns rippled with concern. This is overwhelming. How can we possibly process all these possibilities? Sarah smiled, both physically and through the network. We already are. Look. The countless potential realities were already beginning to converge, shaped by the natural resonance of billions of connected consciousnesses. Some possibilities grew stronger while others faded, guided not by any single species' preference, but by a kind of universal consensus that emerged from their shared experience. Reality is a consensus, Sarah quoted the earlier message, understanding it better now. We're not just voting on what should be. We're discovering what already is. What always was, maybe. Through the network, they could feel the changes beginning. They were subtle at first, slight adjustments to fundamental constants, tiny tweaks to the fabric of space-time. But they were accelerating, building on each other, creating something new. Is this what your species discovered before? The Void-born representative's form rippled with curiosity. Is this why you chose to start over? Not exactly, Sarah replied, accessing memories that weren't quite her own, echoes from the temporal vaults of those who had made that ancient decision. Before, we tried to force reality to change. We treated it like a program to be hacked, a system to be gamed. This is different. This is collaboration. The chamber hummed with energy as more consciousnesses joined the network. Through the temporal vaults, through the nexus, through the dimensional bridge to Andromeda, patterns of thought and reality continued to merge and evolve. And then, something new began to emerge. It started as a feeling, a sense of rightness that resonated through every connected consciousness. Then it became more tangible. New laws of physics writing themselves into existence, not through force, but through universal agreement. The fabric of reality wasn't being hacked or broken. It was being optimized. Oh, Sarah laughed, the sound carrying through both air and network. Oh, that's beautiful. Through their shared consciousness, they could all see it. A reality that maintained the richness of diversity while allowing for deeper connection. Physical laws that supported both individual development and collective growth. A universe that was somehow becoming more itself through their collective understanding of it. We're not changing reality, Sarah realized, sharing the epiphany through the network. We're helping it change itself. We're like universal tech support. The joke rippled through the network, causing a cascade of interspecies laughter that somehow made the emerging patterns even clearer. First speaker Zilith's crystalline form sparkled with sudden understanding. The memes, the jokes, they weren't just communication formats, were they? They were practice, Sarah finished. Every species' attempts at humor, at understanding absurdity, at finding patterns in chaos, they were all practice for this moment, for helping reality itself evolve. Through the network, through the nexus, through the dimensional bridge, something vast and ancient and impossibly young sent what could only be described as an emoji of approval. And in that moment, as reality itself shifted and grew around them, Sarah Thompson, diplomat, human, and now part of something far larger than either, had a thought that resonated through the entire network. You know what this means, right? The entire universe just became one giant group chat. The resulting wave of interspecies laughter might have altered a few fundamental constants. But really, that was probably for the best. After all, any reality worth living in needed a good sense of humor. So, Sarah said, watching as reality continued to optimize itself around them. Who's going to write the patch notes? The consciousness network rippled with amusement at the question. Through their shared awareness, they could all see the changes taking hold. Subtle at first, then increasingly profound as the universal consensus solidified. Ambassador Kathrix, his consciousness now as comfortable in the network as his physical form was in atmosphere, projected what might have been a grin. Patch notes for reality itself. Version Universe 2.0? More like Universe 1.0, Sarah corrected, accessing memories from the temporal vaults. Everything up until now was just the beta test. First speaker Zilith's crystalline form harmonized with the emerging patterns. The changes, they're not what I expected. Through the network, they could all see what she meant. The modifications to reality weren't the grand, dramatic alterations many might have imagined. There were no sudden supernatural powers, no instant solutions to all problems, no fundamental rewriting of existence. Instead, the changes were elegant. Look at that! The Void-born representative pulsed excitedly, highlighting a particular pattern through the network. The universal constants. They're not constant anymore. They're adaptive. Sarah nodded, understanding flowing through her from countless connected minds. Reality is learning to learn. We're not just changing things. We're teaching the universe how to change itself. The evidence was becoming clear in the data streams flowing through the council chamber. Physical laws were becoming more flexible at quantum levels while maintaining stability at macro scales. The speed of light wasn't being increased so much as being taught how to optimize itself for different contexts. Entropy was learning to be more efficient. But the most interesting changes, Sarah continued, watching as new patterns emerged, aren't to physics at all. Through the network, they could all see it. Consciousness itself was evolving, not becoming more powerful or more godlike, but becoming more connected. The barriers between species, between minds, between different ways of thinking, they weren't being broken down so much as being taught how to become selectively permeable. It's like Cathrix's thought patterns rippled with understanding. We're all getting better at being ourselves by getting better at understanding each other. The message from Andromeda pulsed with approval, sending what appeared to be a chef's kiss emoji through the dimensional bridge. But what about... First speaker Zilith began, before being interrupted by a new presence in the network. The temporal vaults were activating in sequence, releasing their stored consciousnesses not in a flood, but in a carefully orchestrated stream. 15,000 years of human minds, each one integrating smoothly into the growing network, each one adding their unique perspective to the universal consensus. Oh, Sarah laughed, feeling the familiar minds join the network. Now this is going to be interesting. Through the connection, they could feel the ancient humans' reactions as they awakened into a reality they had helped shape, and their delight at finding that their descendants had managed to do exactly what they had hoped. Grow up enough to handle power responsibly. You know what the really funny part is? Sarah shared through the network, accessing memories from both past and present. Those ancient humans, they didn't just hide their technology because they were scared of its power. They hid it because they knew something fundamental about consciousness itself. The network hummed with curiosity. They knew that true wisdom can't be given. It has to be earned. That understanding comes from the journey, not the destination. They could have handed us all the answers, given us all the technology, shown us all the secrets of the universe. But instead, they made it into a game. Cathrix finished, his consciousness bright with amusement. They turned the entire galaxy into one giant escape room. Complete with hints, the Voidborn added, pulsing with what might have been laughter. All those primitive human artifacts were breadcrumbs, Sarah confirmed. Every ancient myth, every seemingly primitive belief, every weird human obsession, they were all clues. The ancient humans didn't just hide their technology. They hid the path to understanding it in plain sight. Through the network, they could feel the ancient humans' satisfaction. 15,000 years of waiting, watching, guiding from hidden vaults, all to ensure that when consciousness finally reached this point, it would be ready for what came next. The message from Andromeda pulsed again, this time with what could only be described as anticipation. New patterns were forming in the dimensional bridge, suggesting that whatever lay on the other side was preparing for more direct contact. So, Sarah addressed the council, both through voice and network. Who's ready for the next level? Because I have a feeling our friends in Andromeda have been running their own version of this experiment, and they're probably as curious about our solutions as we are about theirs. The chamber hummed with excitement as reality continued to optimize around them. Through the network, through the newly awakened technology, through the consciousness of every species present, a sense of unprecedented possibility flowed. Although, Sarah added, a very human grin spreading across her face, we might want to warn them about our sense of humor first. I'm not sure the universe is ready for interdimensional meme warfare. The resulting wave of interspecies laughter caused several quantum fluctuations, 3 minor probability cascades, and what appeared to be a small but significant improvement in the universal constant for joy. As the council prepared for their first truly informed contact with whatever waited in Andromeda, Sarah Thompson, diplomat, human, and now part of something far larger than she had ever imagined, couldn't help but appreciate the cosmic irony of it all. Humanity hadn't just been playing the long game. They'd been teaching the universe how to play along, and now finally everyone was in on the joke. The end.